Hello, beautiful midlife maven. Thank you so much for tuning in today to Midlife by Design. I'm your host, Lori Lisai, human design teacher and coach for midlife women, helping you shed the shoulds and remember who you came here to be. If you're looking for a coach to help you navigate midlife and or perimenopause and or menopause, maybe you're just in the fucking thick of it and you need some help making sense of what's going on in life, then book a midlife mapping call and let me help you figure out what is going on and, most importantly, how to use your human design to get the clarity that you need to take the steps that perhaps you've been avoiding and maybe you don't even know why. So today's episode is a bit longer than usual. You've probably noticed, and it is a deep dive into the third of the 4 transformations, which is all about perspective. And I'm looking at both the arrow direction and specific perspectives, which is the color level. And this episode is all about how we see things, how we actually see the world from our specific perspective when it's in alignment. I think this kind of knowledge is such a huge empathy builder because when we understand not only how we look at things, but how the people in our lives may be looking at things so very differently on an energetic level, it really helps you to build some empathy and some understanding and maybe even some patience for people who see things in a different light. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, beautiful midlife mavens. I am so excited for this series that I've been doing on the 4 transformations because it just feels to me like the 3D version of human design, where we can really get into the nitty-gritty of how human design affects us on an everyday basis. And understanding these components of your human design, the arrows in your human design, it can be a game changer, especially if you're having a hard time wrapping your head around what may feel like the more esoteric pieces of human design, like your type, strategy, authority, your gates, channels, etc., etc. So anyway, I'm super pumped to be bringing this third in this series, which has sort of been chopped up the way that I've released the episodes, but hey, that's the way I roll. So remember that the 4 transformations, there are 4 of them, and they go in order. They're meant to go in order. So it's like if you have the first transformation in place, which is again digestion, and that was in episode 71, I think. I'm going to link it in the show notes because I can't remember exactly and I forgot to put it in my notes. But it was the last in the bikini season series. And linking to digestion, or thinking about digestion and how that is the very basis for your 4 transformations in order here at the top of your chart. So once you have that digestion piece in place, are you supporting yourself, for example, by listening to music or a podcast or having some kind of activity going on in the background, or, whatever your digestion is? Are you doing those things? Because that's the base where we build from. And then we layer on environment, which we talked about last week. So again, I will link those in the show notes for you so you can get them easy access. But after you have the digestion piece in place, do you then have the environmental pieces in place? Are the people and the places that you surround yourself and how you orient yourself, are those in alignment? So when those things are all nailed down, then that means that we move on to the next of the transformations, which is your perspective, which is what we're going to talk about today. So Your perspective is how we are designed to see things. And I find this part of human design so fascinating because it explains so clearly why it is so hard to understand sometimes how other people look at things. And once I go through all of the perspectives, I think it is such an aha moment, especially if you're thinking about your partner or other people that you're close to, your parents, your kids, like, oh, that's how they're looking at things. That's why what I'm saying and how I'm looking at it is not translating for them, or vice versa. So, and remember that your perspective can be skewed if your digestion or your environment is off, or if it's not supporting you. So again, because they are meant to unfold in order and support you in order, those first pieces, the digestion and the environment, are super important to how you actually see things. And do you see the things that are meant for you, that are correct for you? So where is it in your human design chart? Of course, go to my website, lorilisai.com, and go to get your chart. And I have added perspective now. So it will show up in your chart. If you look on the side, it'll just tell you. Or you can also look at your bottom right arrow. Okay, so you have the 4 arrows at the top. This one's going to be on the bottom right. And the direction is going to tell you the how in terms of the way you see things. And the color is going to tell you more about the what that you see. So we'll talk more about that. But first, I'm going to start with the arrow direction. So looking at that bottom right arrow, is your arrow facing left? And if it's facing left, that means that you're going to have a focused view. Versus if it's facing right, it means that you're going to have a wide or peripheral view. As per usual, human design has a couple names for the way that the arrow faces right. So it's either wide or peripheral. You may see both. So left-facing arrows, similar to the left-facing arrows in your digestion and your environment, left is more about that structure. It's more about that strategy. It's about clarity. It likes things in order. It's more masculine. It hones in on specifics. So this is you. If your left-facing arrow and your perspective is left-facing, then you think about this is the way you see things. You like to see clarity. You seek clarity. You seek structure in things. You like for things to be kind of linear or in some sort of order that makes sense to you. And I would invite you to pay attention to where your focus is going, because you can choose to shift it into something that feels more aligned. And this is so important because when we are focused on something, that's where our energy goes, right? So as a left-facing arrow perspective, knowing this is so important. Because for you, when you're trying to create the life that you love, create a life that feels aligned, that feels like all of your manifestation dreams come true, understanding that you have the power to focus your attention where you like and focus it on something specific, that is a game changer for you. Instead of feeling like, oh, well, I'm just getting caught up in the thoughts that are in your head. You can redirect them. And I actually had that experience just this week with a mini health scare. Not mini, it felt major, really. And I had to do so much of the work that I talk about this podcast and talk about with you, in terms of nervous system regulation and in terms of redirecting my thoughts, in terms of letting myself feel fear and then understanding that it was temporary and letting it move through me, and redirecting, because I have a left-facing arrow here, redirecting my thoughts to positive outcomes, to where I wanted the outcome to go. So left-facing arrow, more strategic, more looking for that structure, versus right-facing arrow is the opposite. That's the big picture. That's the flow. That's people who see things in pattern recognition as opposed to linearly. They see more nuance in things. They see variation. They're the ones who notice the forest versus the left-facing arrow notices the trees, right? So these are big picture thinkers, and they can see things that other people often filter out. Those left-facing arrows are going to filter out because they're trying to get to all the details. The right-facing arrows are here to give us that big picture, to see what we can't see if we're left arrows. So I want to just put this in the context of midlife and think about how even your direction of your arrow is going to affect midlife choices and how you see things. Do you want more detail, or are you a big picture thinker? And how might that affect your conversations with others? How might it have caused conflict for you in the past, where maybe if you're a big picture thinker and you're in discussion with a detail-oriented person, and you're butting heads, are you making one another wrong for not thinking in the same way? Or are you able to see how you complement one another? And or have you been made to feel wrong in the past for the way that you see things in conversation with other people, or in relationship with other people? And this is an invitation for you to get curious about that. I also want to invite you to consider that environment and digestion component. And do you feel like you spend most of your time in the environment that supports you? Or do you have some of those elements of your ideal environment in the space that you spend most time in, or in the spaces where you spend most of your time, because that supports you, right? So if you're feeling out of alignment there, then your perspective, again, may be skewed. Same thing with your digestion. So where can you make adjustments there so that it feels more in alignment, the way that you're seeing things and pulling things in your mind, like pulling them together? I also want to put a huge reminder in here about your strategy and authority, because of course, when you are truly using your strategy and authority, when you are following what's true for you and being brave enough to follow that truth, then that is going to help lead you to the right things. That is going to help sharpen your perspective. And your perspective is designed to be shared with others when it's invited and aligned with your strategy and authority, which I think is an important thing. It's sort of this projected kind of energy where we all do see things in an individual way that is unique to us. And the way that we teach human design, we parse out all of the different pieces to explain them. But remember, they're all part of our whole, right? We are one human with all of these different elements at play. And so that's why it's so helpful to boil things down to your strategy and authority, because ultimately that brings you to your truth. That is the way that you express who you truly are. So I also want to acknowledge that trying to see things from someone else's perspective is so hard because it's not part of your natural energy. It doesn't mean that as another human, you can't listen with, active listening. It doesn't mean that you will naturally or automatically discount how other people are looking at things. But this is the power of understanding the different perspectives and how we are designed to look at things so differently, and where that can cause conflict because we just assume that everybody should be looking at things the way we look at them. But that's just not the case. And we know that, I know you've probably been in this same situation where somebody may look at you like you have three heads because of the way that you're looking at something. And in my mind, it's just an invitation to understand that we are all one. We're just here playing our tiny little part of that huge oneness. And so seeing the other perspectives as just part of the whole can be another way to empower yourself and to just build that understanding of our shared humanity. So within your third arrow, the four transformations, the third of them is your arrow yes, which I mentioned tells you like how you're going to see things. And then the color part, which is the number 1 through 6, is going to tell you more about like the what that you see. So I want to go through those now and explain a little bit about what each of them is, the colors 1 through 6. And then I'm going to give you a little tip for something to try to, again, add to your human design experiment, something to try that will support your perspective. So color number 1 is called survival. And if you have color number 1 for your perspective, that means that you see what is needed to survive. It's a very baseline kind of way to look at the world. Like, this is what is vital to your survival. So thinking about this as we are in midlife and or perimenopause or menopause, thinking about how do you simplify and stabilize. I love those two words for the survival perspective, simplification and stabilization, because especially by the time you get to midlife, and I've talked about this ad nauseum on the pod, but like, how do you strip away the shit that you've picked up, the shoulds that you've picked up that you continue to do because you feel like you have to? How do you start stripping those away? And if you have survival view, woman, I am telling you, you have to fucking do this for yourself. So how do you look at some of the elements of your life right now and think about, how do you protect your energy and create that stable foundation for yourself? So thinking about things like an audit of the basics of your life. What does your sleep look like? If you're in perimenopause, your sleep might be total shit. So I would, again, point you back to digestion. Look at that first, then look at your environment, and then look at how are you sleeping and how can you support that. If you're only sleeping like a few hours a night or it's very broken up, it's time to seek some help. It's time to make some changes, time to start doing some meditation, lowering those cortisol levels, whatever you need to do to help yourself get that sleep that you need. Think about food. What are you feeding your body? How are you nourishing your body? How can that be more supportive? Are you getting all the vitamins and nutrients that you need? I just learned through this health thing that I have a vitamin B12 deficiency, which of course comes from meat, which I don't eat Well, I don't eat red meat. So anyway, I need to make some dietary adjustments, and I have survival view. So I know that that is going to be really, really crucial for me to do. So I've already started. Thinking about money. What is your baseline for an income? Are you meeting your financial needs? And if not, how do you address that? And then the last thing would be boundaries, like just thinking about the basics of the boundaries in your life and how do you start setting some if you don't have any. If you've got leaky boundaries, or if you find that you're leaking your energy in a million different places, how can you bring it back in? So thinking about your basic needs as a foundation in order for you to build your big dreams on top of. So I invite you, as a part of your experiment, if you have survival view, to try a subtraction week or a streamline week where you remove something each day that is draining you in some way, shape, or form. So take off one of the shoulds that you have every single day and see what happens. See how it supports you. Another thing that you could try for survival view would be taking a micro step in the direction of an emergency fund. Even if it's $5 a week, start a new fund for yourself, put $5 in there every single week, and eventually you'll build this little egg that you have. Okay? And then the last thing that I would suggest is think about doing a pantry reset. Back to the idea of this auditing, looking at the food that you are putting into your body that is feeding your family as well, and just thinking about, do you have everything that is necessary for you to support your body and the nutrients that it needs? And especially in midlife, right? Especially in perimenopause and menopause, when our bodies are changing so drastically, making sure that you have the basics for yourself is so important. Okay, let's talk about color number 2, which is called possibility. And this view, this perspective, is where you see endless possibilities. And from a midlife perspective, this is people who have the opportunity to have so many different ideas for reinvention in midlife. And what a beautiful thing to be able to see all of these things that could possibly work for you in midlife. And knowing that you feel this deep desire, at least most of us do in midlife, to shake things up in one way, shape, or form, or many ways. So here is what I would suggest for you to help you to support yourself with the possibility view. And that is, think about a structured sandbox where you channel all of your ideas into a manageable container. Having all of those ideas, making sure you capture them because they're probably brilliant and wonderful, and understanding that that inspiration is meant to feel exciting. It's meant to crack open the world of possibility and see that possibilities are endless. They're as endless as our universe. But it is in order to avoid that overwhelm, you want to kind of channel it a bit. So figuring out ways to create boundaries for yourself that help you with the exploration of all of those possibilities instead of feeling overwhelmed. So shout out to my friend Michelle, who has an idea journal, essentially, where she just dumps ideas into it. And what I want you to try, if you have this possibility perspective and you want to add a little something to your human design experiment, is Try a 30-day idea dump. And all of the ideas that come into your head, just dump them in this idea journal. She keeps it on Google Keep. You can keep it wherever you want. The Notes app on your phone, using Notion, writing it down on a piece of paper, writing it out a bunch of Post-it notes, and then putting those all in a folder or a book. However it makes sense for you, just making sure that you capture those ideas because they're coming to you on purpose. And one of the things that my friend says is that sometimes she has so many ideas that it's important to also understand when they feel like they're for her and when they feel like they're for other people. And she gets lots of ideas for me that she passes on. So just thinking about that as well, because just because it is the way that you look at things with a possibility perspective doesn't necessarily mean that all of those ideas have to be things that you ultimately take action on and bring to fruition. You know, that's also connected to the other parts of your design. Another thing that I would suggest that you do with a possibility perspective is check out new places. You know, go to a new cafe or a new park or a new restaurant, or go to a new event every week, or something that's going to feed your inspiration and that feeling of possibility, because these new experiences are going to light that up for you. They're going to support and feed that curiosity. And then with all of these ideas, it's not just about, of course, capturing them all. That's the first step. But then the next step would be to test one out and give yourself time for it to unfold. Give yourself like 90 days, the classic kind of 90 days to launch something, 90 days to get into it. Just give yourself 3 months to test out one idea without pressure, without expectation, but just still living in that energy of possibility. Okay, number 3, the third color is called power. And these people have a beautiful tendency to see power dynamics. So thinking about that from the lens of midlife, this is where I invite you to reclaim your authority if you feel like you have let that go. And in fact, if you have power perspective, that is going to be so, so important to your thriving. I also would encourage you to think about the roles that you play in your life. This could be not only at work, but also with your family, your friends. And you are going to notice power dynamics within all of the different groups that you are a part of. And listen, you're not necessarily going to be the leader of all of your groups, especially given some of the other pieces of your design. This is something that you want to have a good understanding of is the rest of your design. However, you do want to understand your part in that and be comfortable with that. So, for example, a projector who has a power perspective is going to really want to make sure that they are recognized and they are surrounded by people who recognize them and who recognize the value that they bring to the table. Because otherwise, you're going to end up in your not self, in that bitterness, a lot more often than is necessary. So how can you rearrange, redefine, rework the spaces and the people that you're spending time with in order to reclaim some of your authority? So support for you looks like really fucking clear boundaries. It looks like clear asks of people. You know, it's powerful, it's clarity, it's leadership. So how do you step into that? And with this power view, you also have this energy of it's influential. And so understanding that you have that influential energy and you start using it consciously, that is very much going to support you. So with this power perspective, those boundaries and working on those clear boundaries and those clear asks, those are the kinds of things that are going to help you make sure that your energy, that powerful energy, isn't then siphoned from other people. So a couple of suggestions for you to try for your human design experiment would be thinking about mapping out the power dynamics. Like, get it on paper in front of you so you can look and kind of see how people are in relationship to one another, who holds the influence in a situation, and where do you fit in that specific dynamic. I also invite you to use the word no freely, often, and effectively, because it is so important, again, going back to that boundary idea, that you establish, this is what I have capacity for. This is what I'm available for. This is what I want to be part of. This is where I want to use this power. And then the last suggestion would be thinking about what your non-negotiables are. So as an individual, and then also as a member of the different groups that you're a part of, your family, your different friend groups, your work groups. What are your non-negotiables? And then start to share that, start to communicate that. As somebody with a power view, there's an intensity that's communicated in your energetic profile that people are just going to feel in your presence. It's powerful. So how can you use that to your advantage to help you come into alignment with your truth? Okay, leveraging it not, to take other people off their path or to manipulate, but instead to use it to come closer to your truth, your expression of that truth. This is how you see things. You see how power dynamics are working out. And one thing I want to say about this perspective is that other people may find it challenging to see things that way. It is not going to be as obvious as it is to you what the power dynamics are of a group. And this goes for all of the perspectives. We each have our own. And so what happens when we are looking at the world from our perspective is that's the way we're seeing things, right? We're not seeing it from all the other perspectives. And so when you're coming in with your perspective, and let's say mine is survival and yours is power, I don't see power dynamics. I see what's the baseline thing here? What do we need for survival? What do we need for basic needs? I'm not looking at all of the other people and how they're interplaying with one another. Versus you're going to see those relationships with people and how they are interacting with one another and what's going on that's sort of unsaid. But you are not paying attention to that basic level need in the group either. So again, it's just a reminder of understanding that everybody's coming from a different perspective. So the fourth color, number 4, is called wanting. And these people see gaps. They see what is missing in whatever they happen to be looking at. So thinking about it from the lens of midlife, we want to think about how do you get clear on your desires? Because oftentimes with a wanting view, you can get so focused on what's missing that you're in this constant I'm not enough. This is not enough. You look in the mirror and you see, I don't have the 6-pack abs. Maybe you used to have them in your 20s, but you don't have them anymore in your midlife. Hello, estrogen and all the hormone craziness, right? So knowing this about yourself can really be a game changer, because you can then start to recognize the patterns that your thoughts have around this and understand, like, oh, this is my wanting. I'm seeing what I perceive as gaps. I'm seeing what I perceive as what's missing. And one of the things that I really would love for you to do, if you have this perspective, is to contemplate how societal pressures and expectations and living in a patriarchy are shaping the way that you determine what's missing. So, for example, going back to the idea of looking at yourself in the mirror, the expectation, you may feel like something is missing because there's this expectation by society that every woman has whatever the freaking measurements are. Like, I don't even remember what the numbers are, but basically thin and fit and blah, blah, blah. All the bullshit expectations that are piled on top of women, that we stay young, that we're perfect little girls. And when you think about what is missing, I want you to just check that against the patriarchy, essentially, and against the conditioning that you may be taking on, and just get curious. And instead, maybe start to use your gift for spotting what's missing to inspire action instead of self-criticism. I would love for you to think about a list of the things that you want, the things that you desire, and think about how you can start creating those, and understanding that the awareness of what's missing is best paired with gratitude for what is present. So if you are always looking to fill the gaps, always looking to fill what you feel isn't there, then it tends to point your view right toward that scarcity mindset. And so in order to balance that, just bring in gratitude. Always remember that there is something to be grateful for. So again, going back to the mirror image and looking at your body in the mirror, your midlife body that is changing. She looks different. You might not have the 6-pack abs that you had when you were 20. However, maybe you got midlife boobs. How lucky are you? Maybe you're loving on your boobs. Maybe talk about how amazing they are. Give them some love. Maybe you love the shape of your thighs. Maybe they're super strong because you've been working so hard outside all summer. I don't know. I'm just like pulling shit out of the air. But the point is that you want to pull in gratitude as much as you can to just balance that. Like, okay, I get to see what's missing so that I can, I want to say, like, plug that hole, and that's a beautiful thing. We need people to be able to identify what's missing. And I also want you to understand that you get to want whatever you want just because you want it. So thinking about making a list of things that you want just purely because you want them, and maybe you see that they are missing from your life. Okay, I don't currently have a classic Mercedes. Maybe I say, okay, I am missing that from my life. That is something I do want. That is active in my mind, something that I want. So I'm going to choose that gap. And then this week, I'm going to take an action toward making that a reality, whatever that may be. Maybe going back to my survival view, it is or for survival perspective, maybe it is putting that $5 away every week, or maybe I start a fund. So one gap, one thing that's missing in your mind, and then how do you bridge that? How do you start to move toward making that a reality? And then, of course, pairing all of those wants, that list of wants that you have, naming something that you are equally grateful for already having. Okay, and that will just help to bring some more balance to you, because I feel like sometimes these people with the wanting perspective can get really stressed out about that scarcity mindset, and when you understand that this is the way you look at the world, then again, you can just start to notice the thoughts in your mind like, oh, there's my wanting view again. There's my perspective coming out. So I'm just looking at this because I'm identifying something that's missing. That's all. That's it. End of story. Okay. Number 5, color number 5 is probability. And these people see what is likely, what is probable. I think they tend to be realists. So if you're a probability, linking back to the idea that I was talking about in the 4th perspective of wanting around conditioning, this is an invitation for you to, in midlife, check yourself when you are thinking about things that seem probable, and start to plan out different scenarios for yourself in order to make pivots that feel smart to you, that makes sense to you. So in midlife, there's so many potential pivots, right? So many decisions that you're making, so many big changes that are happening, whether it's your kids going to college, which as the time of this recording is next week for me, or your parents aging and having to make decisions about them, or any one of a number of things that may be happening for you in this phase. If you have probability perspective, you want to be able to look at those things and think about like, okay, this is likely how this is going to play out. So knowing that or thinking that way, this is the way I see the world. How can I plan for that? How can I anticipate what's coming and work with that? So thinking about using timelines, collecting data to help you with the way that you're looking at the different scenarios. Have you had experiences in the past, or have your friends had experiences in the past where you can use that information to help you then plan wisely? Because what you don't want to do is get stuck in this fantasy that feels super improbable to you. Fantasy mode can be really challenging for people who have probability perspective, because they're constantly wanting to bring it back to, yeah, but what can we actually do? Being able to see reality is the way that you look at it. So if you have big ideas, I'm thinking of if you've got probability view and you have the channel 3140, for example, then there's some conflict there. So think about the big ideas that may be coming to you, the inspiration, the excitement, the wanting to just squeeze all the juiciness out of life. Thinking about that and then translating it into a timeline, an actual plan to make it happen. So some things to try in your experiment would be create like a best case scenario. This is the baseline scenario, and then maybe the worst case scenario, although I always, for me personally, I don't want to focus on what's the worst that could happen, but sometimes for decisions, it is helpful to know this. But that the center column is maybe the most important of this example that I'm giving you, or this idea that I'm giving you, because that baseline is really where you tend to see how things will shake out. It's like, well, this is the best possibility. This is the worst. But actually, this in the middle is the way that it's probably going to work out. So I'm going to plan for the middle of the road here. And again, always going back to your strategy and authority as the thing that's going to help you to build evidence, build some of the stories that you need for your brain to pick up on, like, okay, I have all of this evidence. Now I know what's probable. I know what's probably going to happen because I've had this experience before. So another thing that can be super supportive for you because you have this probability view is tracking habits. Think about using a habit tracker. And again, it's that idea of kind of building that data set, building that evidence for your brain to start to see like, oh, this is cool. Like maybe you didn't think it was possible, but you decided to try it and you changed this habit. And now, 14 days later, you have some evidence of success. And so this helps you to then shift your perspective, shift your thought pattern to update your perspective and say, oh, okay, actually, this is possible. And so now this becomes my new probability. So think about test running maybe like a new budget, for example, or a new schedule or a routine before you actually fully adopt it. And that, again, going back to that whole idea of tracking it for 14 days, you're just building evidence for yourself so that you can try new things and you have some sense of where they're going to land. You have some idea of how it might work out, which is it's going to make you feel a lot better. It's going to make you feel more grounded and aligned. Okay, and then the last color is called personal, and personal perspective sees everything through the lens of your own experience. Everything always comes back to you and your experience. So for you in midlife, it's essentially just looking at your life, looking at your experience thus far, and then translating everything when you're talking to people, translating everything through that lens. So for example, when a friend shares a story like, oh, this happened to me, or this is what I'm going through, oftentimes the first thing out of your mouth is going to be, oh, I remember when that happened to me, or, there's something that you can relate to that's connected to the story that they shared. And I think with this perspective, there are a couple things. Number one, just because you're sharing your personal view does not mean that you are selfish. And there's a lot of conditioning around this, especially because as women, we're expected to be empathetic. We're expected to always think of the other person first, blah, blah, blah. And for you, especially if you have personal view, it's not that you're being an asshole by sharing your connection to their story. It's just that is the way you see things. It's your way of making sense of what they're talking about. So when you share your personal connection to what they are sharing, it's like you are connecting to their experience, and that's just how you do it. So I really want you to trust your lived experience as valid experience. It's valid wisdom. It's not just like personal, this is what I went through. This is how you look at life. So releasing that selfishness, that idea of selfishness, and that's just going to help you to reframe any voices in your head that are saying, hey, you're being selfish by sharing what your experience was, when in fact, you're not being selfish. It's the way that you look at things. So I would invite you to keep a journal. This is so important for 6 lines. If you have a lot of 6 lines in your chart, period, I would say journaling is super helpful for you. But it's just going to help you to collect your experiences and reflect on them and help yourself to understand how your lived experience is creating evidence for you for future use and how it is then coloring the way that you look at life. Another thing to try is sharing more of your personal story with somebody who can benefit from it. So thinking about, are there times with friends or with mentees or people who come to you for advice when you felt like you could see where they were coming from and you could understand what they were going through, but you held back on sharing your own story because you thought maybe that was selfish, or you thought maybe it wasn't the right time or place or whatever. But with this perspective, it's really important for you to share your personal stories. It's really important for you to see your life as a case study that matters to other people. And by sharing, you are sharing part of the genius of your design and thereby unlocking something that you may never even know for the other person. And one more tip would be to think about what feels relevant for you right now and design your next step just solely from your lived experience, from your truth. Even if it doesn't make any fucking sense to anybody else, it doesn't matter. This is for you. It's your truth, and you get to be selfish. You get to be all about you if you have this perspective. So just take that next step that feels right to you based on your lived experience. Okay, so those are all of the different perspectives, both your arrow and the direction that it's facing and the specific color that is related to it. Next week, I will be looking at the last of the transformations, which is motivation. And I invite you to my one-on-one experience. I have some openings for private coaching this fall. And if you want to dive into a tailored experiment that is around the 4 transformations, I would love to do that with you. And or looking at other parts of your chart. Honestly, when I work with my one-on-one clients, I look at the full chart because we are one human with all of these different aspects, as I mentioned earlier. And even though we parse them out to talk about them and to teach them, it doesn't mean that there's only one thing at play at any one time. It's a complicated mix of all of the things. So I love to look at the different elements in your design and offer questions for you and offer my perspective of where can I support you to thrive and to live your truth and to live in alignment with who you came here to be. So I will put the link in the show notes for you to book a call with me if you are interested. Let's just hop on and figure out where you're stuck, take a look at your chart, and figure out if it makes sense for us to work together. And until next time, thanks so much for listening to today's episode of Midlife by Design. I would love to hear what your perspective is. So reach out to me on any of the socials and send me a DM and just let me know what's your perspective and what does it mean to you? Have you been using it? Do you feel like maybe using it is the wrong way to say this? It's really more, have you noticed it? And how does it play out in your life? Like, how do you notice it coloring your world and the way that you look at things? I would so love to hear about that for you because I just adore hearing from my audience. And honestly, as a generator, it helps me feel like, okay, I'm not just talking to this microphone. There are actually people on the other side listening to this. So thank you so much for being here. I am sending so much love and so much good energy for you to, as always, let go of what no longer serves you. I'm sending you joy to fill your days. And I am sending you so much magical clarity to be who you came here to be.